I'm now going to welcome to the stage Cybran Strauss, Director and Founder of FernRidge, who's going to be doing a presentation on Africa data, Southeast and West Africa malls, a comparative case study, and then he will call up his panelists for a panel discussion to follow shortly after. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. This one, eh? Guys, thank you very much. I'm going to take a few minutes, not too long, just to take you through a few slides, some of the work that we've conducted in conjunction with our friends at Brol, and then there'll be a panel discussion thereafter. So yeah, I am a founder and director in FernRidge. We've been around for a good 23 years, and really with clients like Peter and Hungry Lion, that's exactly one of the success ingredients for us over the years, and in doing this for almost a quarter of a century around a very interesting place like the African continent is with progressive and groundbreaking clients. It's also challenging us to say, listen, we got to look at it differently. We can't do it the same way. We got to also push the boundaries. So thanks for Peter. Shout out to him as well. So thanks, guys. So for today, it's looking at around sub-Saharan Africa, which is really our territory. Most of our work is in South Africa, but yeah, I mean. It's always interesting when you talk about Africa, when you sit in South Africa. So we South Africans know what we mean, but it's a Pan-African story. So what today I will call the panelists later on, Moses and from Brol Uganda and Bulaji from Brol Nigeria, and then Jean will be our moderator. But before we go there, these are the three countries that we're going to look at to get a sense of the difference and the similarities between retail assets around Africa. So we've got specific malls in South Africa and Kenya and Nigeria. For obvious reasons, we won't label them to protect some of the clients and some of the detailed information. But I'm just going to show you a few things of what we can do and what we've done on these malls, and that could maybe spark a few debates and what we can do also elsewhere. So South Africa, we looked at a specific mall in Joburg, some of the data sets that we're building from the ground up, and I think it also listening at the last two presentations with JLL, really interesting to see on a more of a macro level what's happening that we can definitely see from a regional, in South Africa, regional context, and on also sectorial context, how that investment is shifting more towards Western Cape, for example. We've got more of a grounds-up approach. We look at data. Data is everything. There's a big void still on quality, reliable, up-to-date data around the African continent. So these are some of the sets that we've got. Is a shopping center layer that we've got for the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. Really any shopping center bigger. Also, what is a shopping center? Anything bigger than around 2,000 square meters. We've got mapped. We've not only mapped, we've got their footprint geofenced, and then there's certain analytics that we can run on that. So this is an example in Joburg that we then layer with our proprietary granular, we call it an Africa Eye data set. Some of you guys are familiar with this. So it's really remote sensing, granular rooftop counting of housing. Most of Africa have got single level or walk-ups. So this is a challenge to do in places like Singapore, Hong Kong, but generally 98% of sub-Saharan Africa, this methodology has proved over the last 20 years to be pretty accurate, where you can, if you zoom in here, you'll see that you've got granular household income. And we've got a whole set of how we determine what's the income or the expected income of a house. So in this case, in Johannesburg, you can see the green is more high income, orange is more middle, and then it goes to middle, low, and low. So you can see towards the east, if you know Joburg, those green areas there is more your Bryanston's, Morningside, Sandton, of course your upmarket areas. This specific case study, this mall around here, have got less density, higher income. So you can already, just looking at the data, just visually, you could, you don't have to do a lot of analytics to just see that what the kind of catchment area that it's in. But we take it a step further. This is zoomed in, so you can see those orange and green dots on top of houses. So those are middle and high income households. And then these two blue, this is a laser, hopefully this will work. These two blue squares are two convenience centers across from each other as an example. And you see the dark blue polygon is really the footprint of the shopping center. So we've got those sets. So then we can geofence that center. And then using ping data or mobile movement data, I think that's a application that's quite prevalent in the market these days. There's a lot of guys that do it. So we are able to ring fence the center, or any place for that matter. And then once this, here's my phone. So once this device enters the geofence of that shopping center, we start to track it. We can track it inside the building, but that's not really the main purpose why we do this. More importantly for us is because we want to look at the market. Where's this? How long is this phone spending in that mall? How often does it come to that mall? To which other malls is it going to? How far did this device travel? Very importantly for us is where does this device spend nighttime? We call it common evening location. So we don't care actually who owns this because it's all privacy-led. You've got to be very careful with that kind of information. We don't care whose phone this is. But if this phone sleeps in Northcliffe, Johannesburg every night, most of the nights, then we can assume that the owner of this phone and the resident is staying there. And then we do a matching exercise. And that's quite unique. That's unique technology or methodology that we've developed where we can then take, so these dark blue dots, for example, are pings from that shopping center. You can see these areas here, those dark blue pings are shoppers that came from the shopping center. And then we can actually match them with our income group. And now you can get a sense of not only what's around my area, but who's my shoppers, what kind of income they have, and all other kind of metrics that I'll show you. All right. Okay, some of the other analytics is a density map of evening locations. So those hotspots that you see there, these red areas, is basically all the devices that we've tracked over a year at that specific center that we call Mall South, and then where do they overnight. So you can see clearly that the center has got quite a dense primary catchment area or immediate catchment area, and then there's a bit of a dispersed secondary catchment more towards the south. All right, then it drops here towards the east. Probably got to do something about this competition, but this is the kind of analytics that we go into. This table here, without going into detail, it's really a benchmarking exercise to determine, because for us still catchment area is very important. And we see that even with Hungry Lion and with some of the filling stations work we do. Although it's very transient, but your catchment area or your primary catchment area is very important. So it's typically where your closest 65% of shoppers reside. And in this case, Mall South, we can see within a 1 kilometer drive distance, 5% of the shoppers reside. And then it jumps a lot to 20% in 2 kilometers. That's that very dense, immediate, almost walking distance to this mall. And then it sort of evens out, and then around 8 kilometers, we get a primary catchment that looks like this. If you can see this funny area. Now this is important because if you've been involved with this kind of catchment area analytics, and I think most of you guys have been seeing some kind of a feasibility or market study, not necessarily from us, but from whoever. If you go to catchment level, it's always a conversation, but why is this the catchment or is that the catchment? It becomes very, I want to say anecdotal and sort of, yeah, no, but I believe this and I've got the mate that lives there, and that's dangerous. Although local knowledge is very important, but we have to rely on data. And this ping data analytics, together with our income matching, gives us the ability to say, listen, there's really no argument. This is what the system, and there's a lot of machine learning also behind this. This is what the system tells us, is that is our primary catchment area. So it includes some of these areas. Yes, these guys also visit the center, but to a sort of less frequent extent. Because now you can consider proximity, frequency, duration of stay, all of those things. I'm sorry, just to go back there. That I also just want to highlight there, that's a South African rand number, or dollars or nairas or kwachas or whatever it can be. Now that we've got the analytics and the next-gen catchment delineation, we can determine what's the market size. So we work with, how do we do it, is we work with various retailers like Hungry Lion, like various South African and Pan-African retailers, that we get their trading information, we get their turnover. It's all confidential, it goes into our data center, but then we're able to model what the spend is, what the total spend is for a certain area. So this catchment area is worth about 9 billion. Cross-visitation, with this ping data, we can also see I'm shopping here, and then I'm also shopping at that center, at that center, at that center. And so we can also measure the level of competition. Where else am I shopping? And this is nothing survey-based, nothing. It's all just from the open source data that is available, some subscription data, ping data, and then our proprietary data. Okay, for the last couple of minutes, just to take it in context with Pan-Africa, I've been focusing on Mall South, looking at Mall East and Mall West. Now, with my friends at Brawl, who will join me shortly on stage, they were quite adamant that we should just be careful that we don't even show the sub. There's a lot more that we can do here, of course, but it's important that we don't show which malls it is, to give any kind of information out that will be sensitive. But what we can show you is, for example, look at these catchment areas. This is all same scale or same zoom level on Mall South, which is South Africa, East is Kenya, and Mall West is somewhere in Nigeria. We can see that the Mall South catchment, I've got about 30,000 households. Mall West, about 50,000. Look at this Mall East. It's just so much higher. It's got a massive low-income component. These white, gray households is low income, very dense. So that is completely different. What does it mean? I mean, this is just 3 examples. You could do this for your whole portfolio. We can do this for the whole market. We can benchmark your portfolio against the market because we've got all the shopping centers data in the system. Now you can also get some more analytics on catchment area, like type dwelling. So typically in South Africa, Mall South, I mean, we don't have a lot of flats really in the suburban areas. Port Cape Town CBD is definitely an anomaly. But this catchment, have got only 3% of people live in flats. But in Mall East and Mall West, they are both around 30%. Now that's important because where you stay also tells a lot, like income. Income is probably the most important factor, but type dwelling is also important because it drives it's lifestyle. You know, you're probably not a family of 12 if you live in a flat and you're middle income. It tells you something about lifestyle. We've got drive distance, how far you travel to get to the mall. There's some more analytics. Day of the week. Now, this is a lot of these malls you'll have food counters at your malls. This is not necessarily a substitute for that, but you've got so much more insights because you can drill down and you can see. But my Saturday shoppers, who are they? What's their profile? What's their income? You can cross and subdivide on that. Dwell time compared to these different scenarios, average visits per month, per distance. So you can see that within, maybe that's on the next one, and that's my, there is my last one. Maybe one thing here is, and these are sort of very similar, that are across south, east, and west, the kind of time that people spend within a mall. Again, only 3 examples. We wanted to actually show you more examples, but it was a bit getting a bit sensitive, and we didn't want to give away also too much that could point to any specific client. So to conclude, really, if I got to pick out 5, and I think this was also with the feedback from Brol on doing this piece together, was matching. What's really different here is that we are able to match this ping data to our income. So you've got a very good idea on income. You've got this next-gen catchment delineation that is not opinion-based anymore. We can do market sizing. We can do all these things with visitation patterns and frequencies and cross-shopping. And ultimately, tools like these are available to really optimize your asset. This is specifically looking at brownfields or existing malls. We can do this for other uses as well. It's very interesting when you look at, I presented a paper at EAPI earlier where we look at the cross-visitation between a casino and a mall and how do those things exist together. But ultimately, it's around optimizing your asset and for marketing, leasing, and capex, even expenditure strategies. Thank you. I will. Thank you, guys. I think I might have taken more than my 10 minutes that I promised John, but John, please join us upstairs. John will be our. Do I need to switch? Okay, there we go. John, Moses, and Bulaji. John, I will leave it to you to introduce yourself properly. Sure. Okay. So Moses is the MD of Brol Uganda, and Bulaji, CEO of Brol Nigeria. Hi.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Cybrand, for this very exciting and comparative presentation. Welcome to our panel. It's very honor for me to moderating this session on a subject that touch at the very heart of the retail sector in Africa. So we got less than 15 minutes, I think. So let's get deep dive on it. Today's topic is about Africa data, Southeast and West Africa malls, a comparative case study. So the purpose of this session is really about to explore the contrast between these 3 regions, hear from our expert here about the opportunities, the risk, and the lesson learned about each region. And let's unpack all this. More are always been, really hubs in each region. So the success and the struggle really depends on the regional dynamics, which differ from east to west and from South Africa. So maybe to start with East Africa, with Bolaji, which is a very category and expertise in this region. So can you tell us how the demand in East Africa, maybe by Moses first, how can you see the demand in East Africa, which is a very young market in terms on retail compared to South Africa, which is more sophisticated? So how do you see this demand shape the retail sector, very specifically in hubs like Nairobi and Kampala?
Yes, thank you very much. I think what we're seeing within the East Africa region is, of course, the data shows that a lot of the population is still young, 19 years averagely. So you find that a lot of the retail that is coming up into these regions would be different from what you expect in South Africa. You don't have the big malls. We're seeing the malls are getting smaller. They're getting more suburban because that's where most of the population is living, urbanization notwithstanding. But most importantly, they're becoming more of a lifestyle. It's not about shopping alone. It's about where people want to hang. It's about, entertainment places. It's about, that sort of hubs where people come and connect because it's a young population you're looking at. And because of that and the constraint that come with, putting infrastructure in for the big malls, we're seeing them getting smaller, more into the suburbia, and probably more convenience leaning and more responding to the local sort of demand in terms of the product offering, the culture, and what the young people are demanding.
Thank you, Moses. Maybe the same question for you, Bolaji, which come from West Africa, especially in Nigeria, where we can see this real powerful consumer base with, as more than 200 people as a population, but still young markets compared to South Africa. So how do you see this demand shape the retail market, especially in Nigeria?
Attached to Nigeria. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I think a lot of what Moses said is applicable to Nigeria and to West Africa, but I think from my side, I just also want to give people a bit more of a story as to how the market has evolved and where the dynamics going forward are going to be seen. So, 20 years ago, the trend was for big regional malls, 20, 25, 30,000 square meters plus. And those were very attractive. There was a lot of investment into those sort of malls. So 2014 was maybe the peak. At that time, Nigeria was the largest economy in Africa. Since then, Nigeria has been in decline, and it's now the fourth largest. I mean, its GDP has gone from about 500 billion to about 350 billion. So you can see the decline there. And the result of that is that the mall size has fallen. We've seen that the retail base is a lot shallower than it was 10, 15 years ago. On top of that, people's purchasing power has declined, and so malls are now more in high-density locations. They're between 5,000 to 6,000, square meters. They're more focused on value, on convenience, groceries, pharmacies, and that type of thing. Obviously, cost is a very big thing, and 10 years ago, it was 150 naira to the dollar. It's now 1,500, to the dollar. So cost is a very big thing. Whether dollar-based rents are sustainable is something that is being debated all the time. Whether we should be moving more to turnover rents, but where the demand is in local fashion, convenience goods, groceries, and pharmacies, and really focusing more on the convenience market rather than on the high value markets, which is what we saw maybe 10 years ago.
Thank you, thank you. As we can see, Nigeria is a very complex market, but yeah, this is very interesting to talk about this. Talk about regional dynamics. There is something very interesting about East Africa, is the mobile money adaptation, where East Africa is leading completely the world. So can you see how this mobile money adaptation and e-commerce integration shape the retail market, especially in East Africa?
Yes, yeah, just to put into perspective, I mean, you have M-Pesa with about 150 million transactions a day. Mobile money penetration in East Africa is about 70%. So all that is pointing to e-commerce. I mean, people can, sort of quickly go in and transact very quickly, which now increases the pool of, people are able to tap into. But the challenge is the spend is not growing that fast. You might be having mobile money access, but do you have the purchasing power? So whereas generally you have more people, with fintech accessing, financial services, you can spend very quickly. The basket, the spend per person visiting that mall has not necessarily grown. And I think that's an area of concern, and that's why we're seeing some of the big retailers reconsidering their positions in some of these markets. Yes, you have big population, but do they have the spending, the purchasing power? How much does a typical shopper, when they walk in, they're 20 years old into shop, what are they going to spend per visit? So that's still challenging. But I think with that, and if we can, as a region, try to structure products that speak to that sort of, change from an e-commerce perspective, then we're starting to see sort of a hybrid between, your typical bricks and mortars and then a bit of e-commerce. But again, we still have infrastructure challenges because people don't have addresses. So even delivery, of some of these services becomes very complicated. So I think, yes, e-commerce is, coming up very strong, but we're going to stay with bricks and mortars for quite some time, at least from East Africa perspective, because we're still far away from, perfecting the infrastructure delivery channels to deliver on that.
Thank you, Moses. Very interesting. Same question for you, Bolaji. How do you see e-commerce shape the market in Nigeria?
I mean, obviously, e-commerce is quite a broad sort of word to sort of use. I mean, if we're sort of focusing on online shopping or the online shopping part of e-commerce, now most of the bricks and mortar shops in Nigeria have not really sort of adapted to or converted much to the e-commerce side of things. I think that a lot of that is to do with the existing infrastructure, is to do with logistics and all of those, because congestion and actually delivery and fulfillment is extremely sort of difficult. So you have a number of very big e-commerce players, Jumia and Mano and others. And the way I think that they can be very complementary to the malls. Malls can act as fulfillment centers. Malls can act as click and collect centers. So I don't see these as competing against the malls. I think if the malls are able to adapt, I think that they can work very well with the malls.
Sure. Thank you, Bolaji. Maybe to end with South Africa, Cybran, can you tell us the lesson learned about the South Africa market? Because the South Africa market is the most accomplished and most mature in Africa in terms of retail sector. So how a region, East and West Africa, should learn about the growth and based on the data that you just explained and what you have seen over the market?
Thank you, John. I think, sometimes I feel lessons learned, maybe South Africa is not the best place where you can look at lessons learned, maybe. lessons learned or mistakes made. But I mean, generally speaking, South Africa, the greenfields opportunities, meaning new development opportunities, they are still out there, but they are few and far between. They are getting smaller and they are getting more rural oriented. And I think a place like Nairobi is someone said, yeah, it's Africa light. Again, saying Africa outside South Africa. So because Nairobi is quite not saturated, because you see these convenience centers, these filling stations, QSR, mini grocery retailers. I think that is certainly a lesson learned from Nairobi that could be very successful, that the guys are also doing here. If you can get the recipe right, and it's almost like a cookie cutter, it's never that easy, but there are plenty of opportunities around that. And so I think that's the smaller, really hyper-convenience nodes, coupled with filling station, QSR, ATM, small grocery retailer, salon services, that kind of model, 2,000, 3,000 square meters GLA. And then the other thing is more maybe brownfield. What we learn from Europe and the States, where South Africa is at, is a saturation of retail space, and it's more repurposing. So you have, remember the theme from the US, when was it, before COVID even, the dead malls. You know, you had websites on dead malls. So there's not, at least not many dead malls here, but certainly malls under severe pressure, and some of them, plenty of them are overdeveloped. So what do we do with the space? Maybe we should put in a clinic or a private school or medical facilities or even residential, depending on the area. So it's, I would say, lessons learned, not necessarily from South Africa, but also what we've done here generally, right and wrong, is more smaller convenience greenfields developments and then repurposing. If there's a mall that was built in Ghana that might be too big, let's perhaps not try and flog a dead horse for too long, and what can we do outside of retail? That is a bit of a mind shift, and maybe it's could be a bit of an ego thing as well, but let's just get it right and what's best for the market.
Thanks, Cyprian. Many thanks for this question, for this response. We tried maybe to summarize what you have said. Demand is really shaping the market. E-commerce is not necessarily competition, but we need adaptation to this. Maybe to circle back to the panelists for the final word. So what we will have to say as final word for the audience, since we don't have time for the questions, so maybe a final word to hand up the session.
I think for me, the takeaway is whatever we do within the retail space, context is very important, because these markets are different. The cultures are different. So what is working in maybe Nigeria might not necessarily work for, Uganda or Kenya. So, investors, guys like us who facilitate the process, we need to do our homework. And I think data is a place to start when you're doing that. Thank you.
And to me, I agree with that totally. In Nigeria in particular, cost is key, whether that is OPEX, that's rental costs, and also making the malls not just a retail destination, but maybe having healthcare or other facilities that are really sort of vital facilities also located within the malls, I think will be key.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I would also say the API, thanks to the API for this collegial kind of collaboration, always for I don't know how many years, and even going to EAPI and WAPI, learn from each other, share. I think us Africans do it well, always in a nice spirit as well, and certainly repurposing. And maybe last thing, it's just a pity that I have to go back to Joburg with this brilliant weather in Cape Town on a Friday, but my bad.
Thank you all. Thank you to our panelists. It was a great honor to moderating this session. Maybe to hand up. Thank you, everyone.